Okay, hello everyone. It's Ty again, and I'm here once again with AJ Wheeler and Charlie Zigman. We just got done with 3 o'clock tamales, and now we are ready to do the roundtable discussion of a couple of articles that tickled our fancy this week. So, who wants to go first on this, guys? Charlie?
Sure, I'd love to.
Do it.
So the article I found that I thought was interesting this week was an article in Forbes called Amazon's Endgame. And basically what it is it's an article looking at kind of what Amazon's strategy has been and what do they view as kind of the end-all be-all to their overall plan of basically controlling the world. And it brought up an interesting concept that I had never really heard about. There's apparently a problem in distribution called the last mile. And basically it's this theory that about whenever you send a product far away, you end up having all these different costs associated with getting it to that place, but that the last mile of the distribution is where half of your overall expense happens because that's the final stage, and that's where it's hard to get people on the ground to have them, where the product is ultimately going. And so a lot of Amazon's innovations that they've made over the years have been geared at trying to solve that problem. And so it was talking about some different steps that they've taken. And like one that I found interesting is that they're working on, we've all heard about drone deliveries. And it's sort of this futuristic idea that like a drone is going to like come and just like fly over your house and drop off your package and you'll just like pick it up and be happy. But one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to find a way so that they have these drones as a feature to their existing delivery trucks. So they're going to have delivery trucks that drive through the neighborhoods, and then the drones like grab the packages and deploy off of the trucks and then fly and drop them off and somehow fly back onto the trucks. And so it's just sort of this interesting futuristic thing. And the article's take was kind of looking at how this could create, how this kind of gives Amazon such a huge monopoly over distribution. But it also looked at some of the like societal gains that could happen from that kind of situation or that kind of end game, talking about like how they were one of the few providers who would be able to stop using cardboard, for example, in a realistic way because they have the facilities and whatnot to be able to make that happen. And so I guess I thought it would be an interesting article for discussion because we tend to look at monopolies as this terrible thing always, but there's an argument to be made that a lot of efficiencies come from that type of scale, and that Amazon being distributed across so many different industries might actually enable it to have somewhat of a monopolistic characteristic, but not with all of the negatives that tend to come along with that. And so I guess I wanted to get your guys' take on, is Amazon getting too powerful? Or will we all soon be sort of thinking Amazon thoughts and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think personally, like on a personal level, like I do think like these bigger tech companies like represent basically like, they used to, when we were little, like the news channels, right? There was 4 or 5 channels where you could get varying degrees of some kind of political or news coverage, I guess. And now there's like really like 4 or 5 like platforms that kind of serve that function for a huge swath of Americans. But if you're talking about like delivery services, like the delivery of just like durable goods, Amazon and Walmart probably are the 2 biggest boys on the block. So I don't really feel like Amazon has a total monopoly over the situation.
Yeah.
As much as we think they do.
I agree.
Because Walmart's been in the game for decades, and has their own secret sauce in their logistical and like warehousing and like stocking kind of things that I doubt Amazon can innovate fast enough to separate themselves from Walmart without Walmart catching up, because Walmart has a bunch of capital behind them that they can deploy. So from that standpoint, I'm not too worried about necessarily Amazon being the end all be all Goliath we think they are.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm naive.
Yeah, I guess on that point, I don't know. I mean, Amazon has a sizable technology investment ahead of Walmart, I would assume.
Sure.
So I don't know where that goes. But I mean, I think I guess I don't worry about the possibility of a company like Amazon becoming monopolistic, because I think that our society knows how to deal with that. I mean, we don't like the idea of more regulation, but that is what happens, right? I mean, there are certain things and services that by their very nature become or have to be monopolistic, like your public utilities, for example. Yep. And so we don't, once that becomes the norm, then government steps in and then creates counterbalancing measures to deal with the monopolistic power that occurs in that particular industry. And so I think there'll be some interesting bumps along the way, but that's kind of the interesting ride for an industry, or for a disruptive industry like an Amazon, is you've got this paradox of, well, you kind of want to like conquer everyone around you and be the king of the hill, right? But at some point, if you truly are the king of the hill, then you attract the attention of governments. And we see this happening in more progressive governments. We see this happening quicker, right? Like, so if you look at the EU and Europe, you see the kinds of things that they're doing with Apple and with Google and things where they're starting to look at large technology companies almost like public goods and trying to regulate how they operate, kind of seeing ahead on this issue. But it's only a matter of time before, if the trend continues that there's just a few to rule them all, it's only a matter of time before the U.S. does the same thing. That's kind of the I guess my view is that's kind of the destiny of all of that, if it heads that way. And so, yeah, I let the political world work that out. I'm not too concerned.
Well, and I think there's kind of like an interesting subtle thing here that happens there on that point that doesn't happen in a lot of the other industries. Because just to like hone in on the word industry, like, when you normally think about monopolies, you think about one specific industry being monopolized. But what happens when you have one company that isn't completely monopolistic in one industry? So maybe they don't own the entire, consumer shopping thing, but they're such a huge force in foods, in data, or in, logistics, where maybe not in any single one of those topics are they the largest, but by being close to the top in multiple industries, that as a group, it basically has a lot of the problems that can come with a monopoly without having the technical status of being an actual monopoly in any one industry. And so it's just kind of an interesting thing, because you don't tend to have that, you don't have like Bank of America branching out into 40 different industries as much, or at least not being as successful in those endeavors as somebody like Amazon. But then I guess with Google, that's another same kind of a thing, where Alphabet has branched out into so many different things that they do, and they're near monopoly status in a lot of them, but not necessarily, top of the top in all of them. And so it just kind of poses an interesting problem that I can imagine would be difficult to regulate against.
I mean, the risk to society and nations of that kind of thing is potentially that the crossover and where they're able to control and influence across distribution chains, right? And so I think that, the government has tools, the Federal Trade Commission, to look at those scenarios and force the breakup of companies that are become too powerful in ways that make them anti-competitive. And so, I guess that's that's how I look at it. Is that I think it's and I'm sure they watch that from a strategic standpoint, exactly like you're saying. Of I'm sure there's probably some formulation of how do we stay just under the ire politically that would cause the public to ask for this, that would cause consumer groups to ask for that, or that would cause politicians to target them for corporate breakups. But I guess my answer to that, not being a government policy guy, I think there are tools out there for it, and that would be the contravening measure for it. Kind of a different note, though. I love the concept of the last mile, because It relates to things we've talked about before. Like, when we look at the accounting work, it seems like how weird that it's so analogous to what we've talked about, like with accounting work. You and I, Charlie, have talked about that point of you can do like 95% of the job, and it's always that last 5% that is most complicated, that maybe you get stuck in, that requires the most time. Maybe it requires the most specialized expertise. So yeah, it was kind of, when I was listening to you talk about that, it was kind of interesting to me that there was this weird parallel there, that we see that in other like physical distribution, that the last mile is an issue.
That is so true. Yeah.
How much did you say it was percentage wise of the shipping cost?
Oh, 50%. So the last 50%. Mile bears 50% of the shipping, of the total, and not just shipping, but the total logistical cost. So including anything it took to get it there, essentially.
That's like mind boggling.
Yeah.
Especially if you could. So I wonder how much of that is actually like realistically the last mile, or if I'm wondering if it's like a statistical average that just happens
I
to
think
be
it's
like
it's like a saying that goes on, I guess, in logistics, which I've never heard before. But
I'm just thinking locally, right? It would be much easier to deliver packages than I don't know if that's true. I don't know. Maybe downtown Portland would be much easier than, let's say, like Eugene or somewhere that's like more rural.
What's that last mile is where the customization occurs, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's everywhere else. It's there could be a standard process that is getting things across the world. But
it's like if you bulk a box full of goods from China to here, then the cost per item of that is so small because you're treating it in bulk and you're shipping that entire thing. But then, to get it to the doorstep is the much harder part.
And I think really like to take that, maybe like that last 50% of that, if you can cut that cost by using drones, that's a crazy amount of money. It gives you such a competitive advantage. It's not even funny. When if your shipping costs, let's say instead of 50% of the cost, it was like 30% of the cost, so you like 20%, you've shaved off that last, 20% of the cost is shaved off by using drones. Man, that's 20% that your competitors don't have on China. And then on top of it, you offer free shipping.
Yeah.
That's something like your competitors can't even get close to touching.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting point. And to your point, it is interesting that you see the amalgamous kind of thing happen in our industry.
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, the other trend that you see in business and technology is, we think about technology making things easier for consumers, but the arc and the overall trend is to make things more easy and efficient for companies, and what I mean by that, and I'm just building off of something I've read probably, or something I've read a couple of times over, is that often what technology does is it shifts the burden of things back to the consumer in some way, right? Like it gets rid of the customer service agent by having this neat technological interface that you can work with, but then it means that the end consumer has to figure out the technological interface, right?
Yeah.
And you think about it like grocery shopping. It's like, is the electronic checkout really a good thing for the consumer or just a good thing for the supermarket?
Yeah.
Because you're shifting the burden of figuring out how to work through the entire checkout process to the consumer. They have to work with the new machinery and all that. They can't just show up and have a human being who kind of guides them through that process. And I think about that in this case, what's interesting here, I was just thinking about this point about the drones, because it seems like, and I don't know what the network theory is behind this, but I wonder if they've thought about the idea that right now we're thinking about the company, Amazon, is, when we think about the last mile and the fact that it's customized because we all live in different locations and in different situations, right? And so in that last leg of the journey, Amazon's taking the responsibility to deploy different these drones that are going to go to all these different unique locations. An alternative scenario would be them putting it off on us. Like eventually maybe we would be required to have our own drones that go to some centralized location to pick up things, right?
Yeah.
But the cynical part of me thinks that's probably where it ultimately goes, is that the cost of having the drone that comes to our house ends up on our plate, because it's located in a central location and we have to get our drones to go out to those central hubs, right? Instead of them paying and servicing drones to come to our unique locations. Well, you got to think it's going to go that way someday.
It's funny that you bring that up, because the article actually talked about how one of the things, they're kind of doing that, but now specific to the returns, because it talked about how, for example, one of the things that they're doing to try to eliminate this problem is that they're having it to where like you can bring your returns to Kohl's, for example, and you bring your or things that you would have otherwise shipped back to Amazon, but instead you go to your storefront and then you bring them all there. And so you're kind of bringing it to their centralized location, which is now a Kohl's or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's an attempt to essentially get all of the people to come to one central location, so that instead of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes more sense because in the long term of technology, it's like, well, if Amazon isn't the one to rule them all, if there is an Amazon and a Walmart and lots of different vendors, then they're all individually going to have drones that all, are flying their own drone. They're crashing into each other to get to our house kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, or on the other hand, is it that we have one drone and it has to interact with all the different vendors, right? It goes out to the different hubs on our behalf, right? It seems like that's actually where the efficiency is going to come.
Like the porch pirates now are gonna, have to upgrade to like pellet guns to take out drones. You know what I mean?
They'll have pirate drones.
That's what I was thinking.
Pirate
Follows
drone?
around the Amazon drones.
Yeah. They follow the Amazon drone, or they hijack the Amazon. That's even better, right? You hijack the programming of the Amazon drone and you fly it to your.
Or just a net.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the answer is to just a good old fashioned net.
Sure. Yeah. The low tech is better. For this.
Yeah. Nothing to trace you back to the net. Oh man.
Good times.
Or coming home, like remember the paper boys, the shitty paper boys that would like throw the newspaper like in the front like hedges. You come home and like, where's my Amazon package? It's like dumped on top of the roof by the shitty.
Oh, I'm
drone.
sure. Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Right?
Occasionally. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching. Make sure you debit your Karma asset and smash that thumbs up, share it with your friends, and smash the subscribe button and the notification bell. Thanks for watching None of Our Business podcast. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.
Thank you.